Hello and welcome to the world of NDE 4.0. My name is Johannes Vrana and today is a great day because we have the second guest for an expert interview. Mr. Lennart Schulenburg from VisiConsult GmbH. And Lennart, first of all, congratulations. I heard you became a big promotion. You actually became part of the management director board together with your father. And what I heard, in a couple of years, most likely you will take over that company. Perhaps you want to say a few words to that, and then we can get to the questions we got.
Yeah, thanks, Johannes. I'm happy to be here again for the second time for this exciting topic of NDT 4.0. And also thanks for your congratulations. It's a big step for me personally, but also for the company. It's the next step in the next generation and into the future. And as we are talking about the future today of our industry, I'm happy to represent also the future of our company. So thanks a lot, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, I think that video we did a couple of weeks ago, your excellent presentation on NDE 4.0 and on the use cases actually for the X-ray industry. We got some good questions from the audience, and let me show it to you. Those are the questions. We have 3 of them, or actually 2 questions and 1 comment, who was congratulating us for this great video. And there is, the first one is from Predictive, who actually has also a YouTube channel, which is called the NDT Video Library, and I will leave a link to that one right here. And Predictive asks, I want to know from Lennart, who is your ideal client and why?
It's a tough question. Who is our ideal client? That's a person who is supporting the implementation of the ideas or of the solutions that we supply, because what you always need to drive change and to deliver change is you need to get buy-in by the operators, buy-in by the responsible managers. You need to accept new technology. So our ideal client is somebody that proactively and openly works with us on implementation. If that question aims more towards what industry or what specific company, it's impossible to answer. The question is the client ideal for an automated system or an NDT 4.0 system? The answer is, it depends if it makes sense. It depends if it makes economical change, because you don't do this just for the sake of technology. It has to have a purpose. And this is something we will talk more later about.
And I think this actually, if we talk about ideal clients, I think if the management culture in a company is not fit for those 4th industrial or those 4th revolutions, that customer is not the customer for any of those topics.
Exactly.
They first have to understand what this is all about. And once they understand it, then they can become a really good customer. Otherwise, they are just still on the road of 3.0 or 2.0. Okay, Pratik has a second question actually. I'm getting a sense that NDE is a nice to have rather than a must have. What am I missing? Do you have any examples of companies not using NDE 4.0 that are suffering because they aren't adapting?
It's another great question. So how do you define suffering? I mean, it's not in a way that you don't implement NDT 4.0 technology, you will go out of market immediately. That in most cases will not happen. But you might suffer from disadvantages. You might not have the cost savings of an automated process. You might have not the cycle time or the throughput that other companies have that invest in this technology. So you have a systemic disadvantage to your competition that is investing. And especially companies that are operating in high wage environments, like in Western Europe or in the US. We have to think even more. What is our unique selling point? What is our advantage over low-cost countries, like in some Asian countries? We have to think about how do we stay ahead and sustain our advantage? And technology that's improving the efficiency and the costs of your operation is the answer. So this is the disadvantage portion, but also you get a different, another edge over your competition by leveraging data. And I agree to your assessment. Yes, all that data leveraging portion is quite soft at the moment because everybody's figuring out how to use that data in a valuable way. And I would say, as a first step, NDT 4.0 prevents you from having disadvantages, and for the future, you can reap the advantages by starting to gather data, but that takes time.
Yeah, I think quite now it might seem that NDE 4.0 is not that important, but that situation will change in the next 5 years. I think in 5 years, if you don't know what NDE 4.0 is, if you don't know how to implement it, if you don't know how to use it, then it might get critical. So it's now the time to get yourself into this topic, and that's why I'm actually doing this, to get out the message so that nobody can say, oh, I didn't know.
So Johannes, maybe we should use a real world example and think back in the early days of the internet. There was a small online book selling company called Amazon. Nobody really thought the internet will be that important. People will buy stuff still offline. It turned out to be a fatal mistake. Think about companies like Blockbuster, who heard about another company, Netflix. Didn't seem so important, but time is changing. I'm not saying the industry will be disrupted at the same pace and the same severity, but it gives you an idea that these new technologies will change our industry and they will make it completely different. And it's our duty as responsible people in this industry to look into this new technology and identify parts and portions that are relevant for you. Don't invest in those that are not relevant for you. We don't invest for the sake of technology. We invest for the sake of value that we add to the company. And this you, with support of solution providers, have to identify.
So Pratik, I hope we answered your questions, and we will come back a little bit to this, why do we need NDE 4.0 in a couple of minutes. If you have any further questions, feel free to ask them anytime. Now, we got another question from Robson Maniau, and I hope I pronounced the name somehow correctly. He's from Gerente NDT, and he says, congratulations for this great presentation. My question is related to weld test. Could you bring more details from the AI applied on weld inspections? What type of weld and wall thickness did you test? What POD can be achieved?
So I can share some details. I can't share all because some of it is confidential. I can tell you that the welds that we worked on most are thin titanium welds for aerospace environments. And you saw already in the presentation, these are quite homogeneous welds. It's not like thick oil and gas type welds who have their different challenges because of very high structure and grainy images and also the higher material thickness. So the POD of that was not sufficient for the first study to be implemented in the practice. But as I said during the last presentation, this was a case study. This was an experiment and will first be implemented as an assisted defect recognition, so only as a safety net. And based on that, the ADR or AI will be trained to get better. So I would say a POD in the 80s, low 90s is what was achieved, but also I have to say, we did not run a full statistical POD study as it's described in the books. This is part of different research projects that we have at the moment to run those POD studies. And this is one that is actually just starting to evaluate how good can AI be and become. But in the end, we will have to look at the POD for every application on its own. It's not possible to say an AI has an intrinsic POD because it matters if you combine it with the specification and with the inspection environments to derive the final POD for that environment.
Yeah, thanks, Lennart, for this excellent comment. I just want to point out two publications which I think can be helpful if you want to look more in detail into this topic. There is one from John Aldrin about intelligent augmentation, which was published now in the NDE 4.0 special issue of the materials evaluation. And a second one, or actually it's multiple papers by Patrick Fuchs. He is working on his PhD thesis on automatic defect recognition and classification and sizing using AI with computed tomography, but he was doing it, as far as I know, mostly on cast components. And he had pretty good success with those methods. And as far as I know, he achieved something like a probability of 95%. Now, we will come a little bit later to that once more. If you want to do AI, yeah, you have to look into those parameters for every single component individually, because those numbers can change very quickly. And therefore, it can be a good methods AI to improve the to improve the POD, but you also have to do it really in a good way. And I'm seeing out there, I'm getting about one paper a week on AI on NDT methods, and somehow I have to say about half of them are not in a way so that you can really apply this AI in the future. So there is a big challenge in doing AI correctly.
Yes, that's a good point, and that's also why we see AI first in a supervised environment where you have an AI running in parallel to the work of an inspector, and you constantly compare the results of the operator with the AI, and you start to understand where the AI lacks information, where maybe the operator needs some retraining, but you need a supervised learning period where the AI gets smarter and where you build the statistical data to build a real POD. I would never suggest, and I think we are a long time away from it, that you just apply an ADR to a process and straight away you get good and reliable results. This will always be a phase between a transformation between the operator evaluation and the AI-based evaluation.
Yeah. So, looking at those questions, I think if I look at them, it's kind of the why, how, and what of NDE 4.0. So let's take it on like the Golden Circle, and let's start with the why. Or as Rippy would say, let's start with the why not. No, let's come back to actually the comment from Pratik about the why do we need NDE 4.0? And actually, I saw a video a couple of weeks ago from somebody from IBM. It was a video from Jesus Mantas, who is the senior managing partner of IBM for strategy, innovation, and corporate development. And what he said in this interview is that with COVID, from an industrial standpoint, he sees that actually digital transformation, for COVID, it was a strategic advancement or it was a benefit for that company doing it. But with COVID, he sees that it is actually becoming really something urgent, something we need to apply now, because otherwise there could be a future we do not want to see. And I kind of also see this in the NDE industry, because we have situations that people, or especially inspectors, cannot travel as they want to. We cannot travel to all those countries we have to travel to. So we have to use inspectors locally, which perhaps are not as well trained as we would like them to be. So we need something like remote NDE. So Lennart, I think let's discuss a little bit why.
There are many whys to switch towards a more automated or a more technological phase in our NDT environment. And I already said in the beginning, one big driver is cost competitiveness. We have to be able to produce more in less time. There are several reasons for that. Cost is one reason, but also the demographics in our countries are another one. Our populations constantly shrink, and at least in Germany, there will be a big retirement boom coming in the next years. And we need to be ready, or our companies need to be ready to produce the same or potentially even more with less people or with less trained people. And this is another one, the skills gap that we see in our environment. The work that we do becomes increasingly hard or increasingly more complex, not hard. Hard is the wrong word. And we need tools and technology that will support us to achieve them. And we can't waste work time or capacity on doing tasks that maybe a robot or something else could do much better, because we humans, we are incredible beings. We have a brain that is very, very capable, and we should use our capacity to apply that brain to work. But also on the sustainability side, I mean, I can only speak for X-ray. Using a film that's made out of silver, for example, and then using chemicals to develop that film, and then store it in an archive that needs to be climate controlled using ACs, that's not sustainable. And this is not a political discussion, but we talk about climate change, and at the same time, we use highly dangerous substances and damaging substances. And this is another purpose, because NDT 4.0 with many of its facets helps you to avoid waste and to avoid or to create a more sustainable future. So there are many drivers, and I'm not even starting to get into what you can do with all that data, because if you apply that data to fine-tune your processes, you reduce your scrap rates. That's cost efficient, that's sustainable, and that makes an impact. So the purpose is quite big and has many different facets.
And I think also the NDE industry, we have kind of two phases. With one times NDE in production, where the business case or the use case for NDE 4.0 is quite straightforward, because they want to have all the data in the industrial production to improve their production, their design, and so on. And then there is the second side of NDE, which a lot of inspectors are coming from. And that's the side of all the service inspections. And within the service inspection, you are going out to the field, you're scanning your component with ultrasonics, or you apply X-ray, and it seems for you that this is a different thing. But also on the maintenance side, people are thinking more and more about predictive maintenance. Even in construction services, they are thinking about some structural health monitoring, stuff like that. And they need the data from all the sensors. They need the data from the NDE to apply it to the predictive maintenance. And in my eyes, if the inspectors do not gain that knowledge they need to apply NDE 4.0, let's say somewhere in 5 years, then they might be replaced by the ones who actually trained themselves with that knowledge. So I think this is for me really the important step. The most important step for the moment is training yourself. And that's a little bit already coming into the how, because this is for me the fundamental step for how do we get to NDE 4.0, and that's training.
I agree. I cannot agree more, because we as solution suppliers see it many times. Companies decide to move in this sphere. They order an expensive and great machine, and it's delivered, and people get a reality shock because they come from a very manual film world um, in zero time towards robotics, digitized processes, digital evaluation, and people are not used to actually work with all that technology. And frankly, are also afraid a little bit, and I can't blame them. It's a big step. It's a cultural shock. Everything works differently. And what we need to do very, very early, we need to start with anticipating these changes, training the workforce, making sure we are prepared for the changes that are coming. Because implementation, let's say it takes a year to implement all this technology, but getting the workforce ready is probably 1 or 2 years process before the actual implementation starts. So you want to be ready for this move as soon as you decide to upgrade to the new technology.
And what I can actually see currently, we're currently in a transition in NDE market from a digitization, which is just a digital transformation from an instrument or of the data, to a digitalization, where we are speaking about making actually our processes digital. And I see a lot of inspectors who are still in writing those reports in a handwritten form or by putting it into Excel if it's high tech. But there will be pretty soon, every inspector will have to use an NDE workflow system, which, if it's done correctly, will actually help make your life easier, but you have to know how to operate it. If you don't, yeah, you apply for a job, they ask you, can you work with such a system? You say no, you're out of the box.
You're mentioning a very important point. You don't just transition from the current systems, which are based on NDE 2.0 or 3.0 to 4.0 and leave everything as it is. Typically, a transition results in rethinking processes, because to really reap all the benefits of the new technology, you need to do things a little bit different. If you keep your normal film processes and just bring them to digital and then expect it to put a robot in front of it, it will not work. So you need to actively rethink the way. We can't just continue as we always did. It has to be different, more optimized. And many people in our industry are hesitant for this step because it's a very, very safety conscious industry, and that is important and that is right, because foremost our job is to make sure we have safety and the parts that are inspected are safe. But if we change or if we transition in technology, we need to rethink and question the way we always did things.
Yeah, and there is another step coming up behind digitalization, which will be digital transformation. And you also already talked in your video about that step with the Internet of Things. And that's where we are getting into what I was saying from the very beginning of the start of this YouTube channel, that NDE 4.0 is a world of collaboration, because it's getting into, yeah, you have to get your data from company A to company B, combine it with the information of company C and company D, and everybody has to work together. We have to get away from those proprietary data formats, those proprietary interfaces everybody in NDE industry is using and fighting to keep it happen. But for me, we have to get to that point, because otherwise I already see that some big players actually are getting into the NDE market. I just heard that IBM is actually thinking about visual inspection systems. For sure, they are not calling it NDE, and not a single NDE person is actually in contact with those systems. And now Hexagon bought Volume Graphics, another big player, And that will go on. So there is a chance that if we do not adapt to that, if we do not go the step to the digital transformation, and for me, it has to be within the next 5 years, because otherwise we will run into that situation. So, and that's also why actually the German Society for Non-Destructive Testing created a memorandum of understanding for data transparency, that we as an NDE industry need data transparency, that we have to get away from all those proprietary data formats and interfaces. And by now, also the Austrian Society of Non-Destructive Testing actually agreed to that, or put their name also on top of that memorandum of understanding. And we're in conversation with others also to put their names on it. And yeah, VisiConsult was one of the first ones to actually sign that memorandum of understanding. And I will put the link to that memorandum of understanding right down in the description so that you can also get to it. And perhaps you can also be one, sign that one. But Lennart, why did you sign that memorandum of understanding?
Yeah, it's a great point. And as you know, we were the first manufacturer to sign it. And the way data access is was used in the past is always a malicious way. Think about Apple, right? If you have an iPhone and you have a MacBook and you have all your stuff in your iCloud and you have all the data in there and you have Siri and you have iMessages, chances are high you will never leave that ecosystem, because Apple did a smart move. They force you into that ecosystem. They will make sure you continue to spend money. So it might be a little bit strange why we as a manufacturer say, no, that's not right. It should be an open interface. You as a customer should have the choice where your data goes, what systems you use, how you configure them based on their specifications. In my eyes, a manufacturer should not force the customer to stay in his product environment or ecosystem. So that's why we are supporting of an open interface that makes sure data can transition seamlessly from systems to systems, from different manufacturers and different environments. That for us is an important value, even though it might be a strange value for a manufacturer. And as I'm aware of, not manufacturers have yet signed this MOU. And I can only ask you as the end customers and end users, because the paying customer can decide what to do. Force the market, force the suppliers of NDT systems to actually buy into this vision. Because if not, nothing will change. And you as users will always have the disadvantages of having a fractured environment and not being able to reap the full benefits of NDT 4.0. Just think about MP3s. Imagine we would have 10 different formats and 10 different players for MP3 files. It would be a big, big pain, and you would not be able to listen to your favorite artists or favorite music on all devices. And the advantage of MP3 shows us very clearly the advantages of having a unified, open standard that everybody can use. And I fully support Johannes and the efforts of the DGZFP to push this further and to create an industry standard that everybody follows.
Yeah, it will also give you one benefit, and perhaps, Lennart, your company will not like that, because if we have open interfaces, you could actually use the AI, which you can get from VisiConsult, or you could get some other AI. And in particular, if it's not just radiographic information, but also perhaps some sensor data and some ultrasonic inspections, perhaps you want to use an AI which actually can combine all of that information and bring it together. I like the AIs VisiConsult is doing, but I think in some future, it actually might be the case that you want to use a different one, or you want to use an augmented reality or a blockchain or whatever. And you can combine all of those stones and build up your own house, the one you want to use, the one the customer wants to use. This is not anymore about doing what we as companies think is right, but we want to give the customer the best experience so that he can combine all of those things he likes.
But yes, and you said, I might not like this. I like this because I want our customers to use our solutions because they are the best and not because they have to use it.
Yeah.
That makes an unhappy customer. So actually, we as manufacturers are fully aware that we are opening us up to the full spectrum of competitors. But at the same time, it makes sure that the best company or the best solution is being used in the field and not the one the end user is forced to use. So this is part of our values, that we don't dictate our customers what to do. And if they think a different solution is better, then they can make that decision. We have to make sure as suppliers that we supply the best solution.
Yeah, but now with the AI, we are actually back, or we are now into the category what. So I think AI is a really good tool for a better inspection quality if done correctly. And this is hearing what you are doing with all those research programs. You're making sure that AI is applied correctly. But as I mentioned, as a reviewer, I'm reading a lot of papers about AI, and some of them actually scare me. Because what it means to apply an AI, yeah, if a human makes an error, he does it once. If you train an AI incorrectly, that AI will make the incorrect decision over and over and over again. And perhaps you're not even questioning it. So perhaps, Lennart, you can say a few words about how you make sure that your AI is actually doing what your customers are thinking that it will be doing.
So, Johannes, first of all, I don't think that every human being does a mistake only once, but that's maybe a philosophical question. And second of all, first of all, the mistake has to be found, right, to be corrected. And many times in NDT, there is no peer reviewing, or there's a single decision, and a flaw that escaped is maybe found when an aircraft goes down, or a tube breaks, or a weld fails. So many times I fear mistakes are not found, and I will come back to that, why this might be different with AI. But let's first how do we try to show our customers what the AI does? Because you're right, the AI is to a certain extent is a black box. It's very hard to understand under what was the reason for a decision. So when we look at the whole AI topic, we look at something called explainable AI. We try to get cues and present these cues to our customer. Why did an AI come to a decision? A very typical example of how things could go wrong, which happened in the past, is that inside an image was a text that said okay or not okay. And that was inside the image. And then the AI was trained, and the AI was perfect. It had 100% reliability. It was able to say which image is okay or not okay. It came out, the only thing that it learned was to read the label. It was able to process the language and learn that every not okay image has this not okay text in it. So we have to understand why an AI comes to a certain decision. That's crucial. And if we train the AI in a wrong way, we might superficially get the right results, but ultimately we don't get it. So that's very important, and that's why we work on something called explainable AI, trying to get the user, like, showing cues inside the image, which image features led to a conclusion. And this will help a lot in explaining it. If that's sufficient, well, that's the standardization has to decide, and also the statistical tests. But now let's come to how can AI maybe help to also detect mistakes that have been made in the past. So AIs are something that can be upgraded over time. So all the time that there's a new generation or a new software update, we can update the AI, and it hopefully improves. But what we also could do is we could archive all the old images and let it run over the old images. First of all, to see that the performance is still the same, to do a statistical test, but at the same time, maybe that new version of the AI finds something in the old data set that has been not found at the old status with the old software version. So we then, okay, we realized, oh, damn, that was a mistake. Something escaped, but we might be able to call that customer or to go there and to fix it and to say, well, there was an escaping part with a flaw. Please take it off that aircraft if it's hopefully not failed till then. This will never happen if you have a human operator, because he does the decision once, that thing goes into an archive, and nobody ever looks again for the next 30 years. And with an AI and a digital archiving system, you could actually get around this flaw and even get an advantage.
Yeah. So I think we are running pretty long on this video, and I think we should be summarizing. There, perhaps one quick last point on the AI. For me, we need something like POD, reliability things to actually see, is the AI doing what we think we are doing? We need something like explainable AI to actually see why it is deciding like it is. For example, yeah, you mentioned that example with the X-rays with the okay, not okay. There was also a famous example with somebody investigating, okay, do we see pictures of dogs or of huskies? And they had also a 100% POD. Yeah, until they showed a dog in snow. That dog was for sure a husky because all of the pictures they used for training, yeah, all the huskies were in snow, all the dogs were not in snow, so the AI just looked at snow or not snow. But that's why I think we kind of need some standardization, how to make sure that AI is applied properly. And that's something we urgently need to work on, because there are so many companies doing AI by now or starting to do AI. And we really have to make sure that it is done properly. Otherwise, we might face some future we do not want to face. So, Lennart, any last words before we finish up?
It was a great closing remark. It's exciting new technology. It should not be applied mindlessly. There should be a good strategy. And last but not least, going back to Pratik's comment, it is not something you do for the sake of it. We always have to look for an economic benefit for the company. And if there's none, don't do it. Only do it when it makes sense. Be purposeful with what you do and know your why. Why are you implementing something?
But think double and triple about if you really do not need it, because in some cases, if you look a second or a third time, or you get somebody from the outside actually helping you to look into your processes, you might be seeing quickly that you actually need it. So,
yes.
Thank you, Lennart, for joining this trip on the Golden Circle, the why, how, and what of NDE 4.0. Thanks to all of you for watching. And pretty soon, I will have another exciting guest. And if you want to actually see more of Lennart's presentation, because that one, I had to make it a little bit short the last time, because I didn't want to run more than half an hour on that one. Please write it in the comments and you will get more. We will do another video. So thanks everybody for watching. See you soon and bye.
Goodbye. Thanks for watching.